Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner, your co-host, and I have to start out by saying, especially because of tonight's topic, it's hotter than fish grease here in Jacksonville, Florida. That's been my tag, Doctors Holder, Kane, and husband. That it's hotter than fish grease here. Not that I know how hot fish grease is, except when it's splashed on me when I decide to fry some fish. But I am delighted that we're talking about climate change and global warming tonight because, as I posted on my social media page, regardless of what people say, it is real. So, to our viewers, you're going to learn a lot tonight. We have two distinguished guests. But before we start the conversation and welcome our guests, I'd like to bring in co host Dr. Rogers Kane. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Kane?
I'm doing just peachy, as you used to say. You always saying. I was going to ask you, what does fried? How does being fried feel like? What that feel like? I've never been fried before, so
No,
I've
it's
been
the
boiled a
grease
little
that
bit.
pops on you. It's the grease that pops on you from frying.
All right, I got it. I got it. Ladies, how y'all doing? All everybody's good.
Yes, great.
All
Thanks
right.
for inviting me tonight.
Well, we're happy you're here, Dr. Holder. We can get into a little bit of Dr. Holder and Dr. Husband. Two of the people I think I know that know the most about climate change, and can very well inform our audience at what we're looking at and why you should be concerned about climate change or why anyone should be concerned. So without that, I'm not going to hold Miss Turner up. Let her do her thing right about now. You got Miss Turner. Last week we talked about a new part to our show. Are you ready for that
Not
now?
quite. I wanted to, yeah, we can go ahead on what since Dr. Kane let the cat out the bag. As he mentioned last week, we celebrated our 100th episode, and in that we launched our Black History Moment from our perspective. Hopefully, we will find a history maker that corresponds with our topic for tonight. Our behind the scenes technology guru, Tyrone, did his homework and has some very interesting information to share with us as far as our history maker for the evening. So before we bring on our guests even further, Tyrone, if you could go ahead and cue our Black History Moment, please.
Welcome to Pause for the Truth History Makers Minute, August 15th, 2023. As we reflect on the past and present, it is important to recognize the people and events who have made significant contributions to America and the rest of the world. African American entrepreneurs and inventors have created critical technologies that are enabling our fight against climate change today. We are highlighting one such figure in this effort today. We realize there are many African Americans contributing in so many ways to fighting the most pressing challenge of our time. Dr. Warren Washington was born on August 28, 1936, and the second African American to earn a doctorate in atmospheric sciences and one of the first developers of atmospheric computer models, which are helping scientists understand climate change. His climate models have evolved to incorporate oceans and sea ice, and his research has been used in Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, which provide policymakers with scientific assessments of climate change. Washington and his colleagues were awarded the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize for these accomplishments. Dr. Washington has been quoted to say, "We're going to have to face up to something that's going to affect our children and grandchildren." I think what really wins out over time is that the science will speak for itself. Thanks for tuning in to Pause for the Truth and this History Makers Minute about Dr. Warren M. Washington. Black history is American history. Arm yourself with the truth.
You might be wondering, who are those two people, Dr. Kane?
I don't know him.
Gee whiz. But you may be wondering, and I just have to say that the reason we decided to share our Black History Moment is you all know, you've heard what's happened in the state of Florida regarding African American history. So, as one of our guests said over and over again in the past, we should tell our own story. So, we decided to tell our story of some of our history makers. So, hopefully, you will learn from those history makers as we are. As you can tell from the intro, we are talking about climate change and global warming. Again, we've all been experiencing these extreme temperatures, extreme heat temperatures, getting warnings almost daily of protecting ourselves. Here in Jacksonville, they've even opened up cooling stations, or cooling centers. And actually, Drs. Holder and Dr. Husband, the first time I learned about cooling stations, I attended the National Urban League Conference a couple of weeks ago and actually attended a session on climate change. And that was where I learned about it. Little did I know that we'd be opening them up soon here in Northeast Florida. So without further ado, let me bring on our previous guest, because she is a regular and needs to go ahead and be co-host on the show. And that is my good friend and business partner, is what I like to call her, Dr. Lorene Husband. Dr. Husband, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I just finished my run, so that's why I'm glowing.
Oh, I don't see how you do it, Dr. Husband, out in this heat, man, but it was a little cooler this afternoon. So I guess you wanted to take advantage of it.
Yes, I did. I hadn't been outside all day, so I needed some sunshine.
I got you. Well, thank you and welcome. And Dr. Cheryl Holder. Dr. Holder, I think you've been on in the past, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I have. So thank you for inviting me back.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And Dr. Kane has spoke very highly of you. So without furthering the conversation, or I should say without, let's just go ahead and get started. How about that? Since I'm getting a little tongue-tied. So I did my homework, and let's talk a little bit about climate change. For those of you who are not aware of what it is, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperature, precipitation, and patterns, and other aspects of the Earth's climate system. Global warming, on the other hand, specifically refers to the increase in the Earth's average surface temperature due to the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, primarily carbon dioxide and methane, which trap heat and lead to the greenhouse effect. Now, Dr. Holder, we hear about this in the news often. Why in the world? That seems so cut and dry for me. Why do people fight it? Is it because it costs a lot to make adjustments from business's standpoint in terms of carbon dioxide and methane?
Well, the fight started many, many years ago because the whole climate changed, and the concept is, did humans play a role or not? So the fight wasn't in that the climate changes, because climate adjusts over centuries. Is there something that humans did that forced a change to be more drastic than what was expected? So through much of the suppression of data by fossil fuel industry, they have noticed this pattern that since the last, probably from the 60s, 70s, by increasing more fossil fuels, which was done in the Industrial Revolution. So we're going back to the 1800s when we had to change, when humans started doing something different to our planet. And that difference was using fossil fuel to power the Industrial Revolution. But those then left a lot of pollution, a lot of CO2, and that's gradually over the last several hundred years, we started seeing where the planet was reacting differently. So the big fight was whether humans played a role, or is this the natural pattern for our planet? And the scientists and everyone said clearly, there's an underlying increase and decrease in planetary temperatures that has been ongoing for centuries, for thousands of years. However, from the Industrial Revolution to now, we see a blip that has caused higher temperatures over time. And so that natural ebb and flow of the temperatures have changed. And that's where humans come in. And that comes in with the pollution and the driving of CO2 and the rising temperatures. And we can talk some more about how it happens in the whole science. And now we're seeing the damaging effects and we're seeing the health effects.
Without seemingly, I just have to go ahead and say it. I don't know this answer, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. Is fossil fuel being used as much today as it did during the Industrial Revolution?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even more so. I mean, look at all our technology. Just keeping computers running is using a whole lot of energy. And the whole world has become even more industrialized. So in the past, it was just a few Western countries, but now it's the entire world. So we're seeing a much more use. Everyone talks about China, but China has only started putting out more fossil fuel in the last 20, 30 years. But if you look at all the Western nations, we're double what the Chinese has put out. So we have to drive our future, and we're driving it. Just look at your day-to-day, how much plastic you use, how much everything that we use as a country, light, the gas, the cars, the trains, the plane, everything that we do. So we are accelerating the use of fossil fuel.
Wow, and it almost sounds pretty grim and pretty dismal. And then also when you start seeing the diseases, when you talk about the health effects of climate change and global warming, I don't know about you, but it seems more and more that you're hearing about people dying from environmental causes. That's what I see.
Well, what I want to get folks to realize is that the health effects didn't just start with the extreme weather events. You go back and look, where do they put all those polluting factories? Where do they dump all those trash? There's a whole area in the US we call Cancer Alley, running along the Mississippi. Most poor Black and brown communities bore the brunt of the revolution that we saw, the industrial, of pollution. So people have been dying from the pollution for many, many years. And now we have the change in our planet and the temperature. Now the extreme weather events are killing even more people. And it's not just in the US, but across the world. The drought is killing millions of people in Africa. The flooding is killing many people in Asia, the sea level rise. So we've been dying quietly because it's not been in anybody's radar, because it's usually poor people. But yes, it's more now in the news, but this has been ongoing for hundreds of years, this kind of death from pollution and death from fossil fuel. And now the extreme weather.
Its place in the news cycle has always been trying to, big money, Wall Street has been suppressing the placement of climate change, and obviously it's because of money. And the biggest thing that because this started, I remember being a little boy and watching television. They talking about an old cartoon called Captain Planet. I'm really dating myself now, but a cartoon called Captain Planet. And this whole genre was about trying to save the planet from the pollution, which we tend to forget about when we talk about climate change, because we're thinking more about the heat aspect of it. And that's reasonable because it affects us directly as opposed to affecting us indirectly. But I remember them talking about that and the situations as it relates to climate change as a little boy. And it's coming to fruition right now. And we, as our generation, needs to start holding ourselves accountable for future generations. If we don't do something, what air will your children breathe? What air will your grandchildren breathe? And I'm just talking about the air. These ladies know a lot more about climate change than I do. But if I just feel like we need to be a lot more educated on this and start paying attention, because you can have all the money you want. If you can't breathe, it won't do you any good.
Yeah, the air is one aspect. But when you look at the changes at the temperature, all the infections, Because think of we just had malaria in Florida. You guys heard all the news. The
Exactly.
malaria. It's the bugs, the mosquito. When it gets that malaria parasite, it replicates more in the heat, and it's easier to transmit and grow. So it's not just malaria. Our trees are growing all over, moving up. There's a fruit tree in Jamaica called breadfruit in the tropics. It's now probably going to be able to grow further north because our temperature is warm. But these are invasive species. So we're seeing growth of infections. There's the amoeba-eating bacteria for the brain that grows in warm water, warm fresh water. The more warm fresh water we have, the more likely you get these infections. So it's not just the air, it's the infections, it's the allergies, and the heat, which is the number one weather-related killer. That is taking its toll, but not just directly, but think about if you got heart disease and you get stressed out, higher risk of heart attack, your blood pressure goes up, your mood changes. We see increased suicides when it gets hot, more anger when it gets hot. So it's just every aspect of our lives will be impacted by what's going on with our planet.
Lorene, you and I were talking earlier, and you are a part of a community garden, and you were just sharing how you've been seeing the difference in the garden. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was sharing that. I was in the garden on Saturday, and some of the plants that I love were doing really, really well. But remember, this week we've had extremely high heat, even more so than we had last week. And I went there last night to pick something that was alive and doing really well on Saturday, and it looked like somebody had lit a fire in the garden. So several tropical plants, and these are tropical plants that the heat has exceeded even their rate of tolerancy, and they looked like they were burnt by somebody.
Wow, and that's real. Lorene, what sparked your interest and passion for in the climate change space? And I'm also going to ask you, Dr. Holder, that same question.
For me, it was when I was growing up. I grew up in Kenya, and when I say this, I'm talking about the British and other Europeans, when they brought corporate farming of specialty crops like tea and coffee, and they raised our fields, and including our historic trees that were trapping the carbon in the atmosphere, and brought these specialty crops. I started seeing as a little girl, like Dr. Holder was just talking about flooding. I started seeing flooding starting to happen in the foothills of Mount Kenya, erosion. We started, even though my tribe is an agricultural tribe, we started experiencing hunger for the first time because we were now growing cash crops, not edible crops. And we were now growing for the Western world industries of pleasure, like coffee drinking and insecticides. We were growing pyrethrum, which is very toxic. And for the people growing it, they end up with cancer and death. But for the people who have bug spray, you never think about who is growing it and how they have to interact with that product, and possibly the fact that it's killing them. So I started noticing that. But before I left Kenya, Dr. Wangari Maathai, who actually ended up getting a Nobel Peace Prize, asked every woman in our tribe, women, girls, to each plant 10 trees a year. And in 5 years, what had been deforested was dying, started coming back. And we started growing crops differently. Instead of just raising fields, we started growing crops with trees alongside them. So, which is so sustainable. So those type of things started really drawing my attention. And then I remember when the Kenyan government decided to outlaw plastic bags, and there was such a huge outcry in the rest of the world. How is a third world country going to be able to do this? And then when they were talking about this is one of the things that they can see them doing. That is, you know, how you say you want to do something quickly and achieve success so that people can start getting it. And they did that. And all of a sudden, not only did our country look cleaner, but we were not contributing to, you know, the proliferation of plastics in the environment. So, so
Wow,
yeah.
that's a good history. That's some good strong. I like and that gave you a solid foundation as far as the work that you've been able to do in public health throughout the years and all the things you're doing now related to food insecurity and working with Black churches and, you know, and helping them to understand the importance of addressing food insecurity. And we'll get back to that in a moment. Dr. Holder, what about you? What sparked your interest in this space?
Well, I have to say, I'm with the National Medical Association, which is the oldest Black medical organizations from 1895. And we have always had an environmental justice subcommittee. And again, like I said, all this pollution had been selectively placed in Black communities. And so much of our work was around environmental justice and chemicals and plastic and the pollution, and especially Cancer Alley. And with that, Dr. Mark Mitchell, I have to give him a lot of credit for starting to help us connect the dots. And then my patients came in 2016. I mean, this is years ago. Before that, as environmental justice. And then 2016, a patient came in because it was so hot that July, and I'll never forget, it was hot like this. We beat 2016. Until this year, 2016 was the hottest on record. And she couldn't pay her light bill because the heat and her decompensation of her health problems left her with choosing between paying the light bill or buying her medicines. I'm glad she bought her medications because it kept her alive till we could figure out how to get her some help to pay her light bill. But that's when I started paying much more attention to so many patients who are being impacted, right down to my lawn people. They were getting hot and heat illness, or they couldn't afford, they were out cutting grass and couldn't afford to keep cutting and keeping up with their trees. And you hear about the growth. The high CO2 is making all our trees grow faster. And I had a poor patient who, fixed income, her tree came down, and because of the limb growing so big and she couldn't afford the pruning, she was at risk with the insurance company of not getting covered because they wanted the whole thing with her mortgage, all because the trees were going faster and caused problem when the storm came. But it comes back to the climate. It comes back to all the impact that my patients are feeling from the allergies, from the trees, from the heat illness, from not being able to keep up with their bills. And these folks are not out here flying to Europe, spending a ton of money. They hardly run their AC. Half of them don't have cars, yet they're paying the brunt of the harm because of what we've done to our planet. So that just mobilized me. If I'm going to get my patients healthier, I got to do root cause analysis. I've got to get to figure out how we're going to make that change. And now
yesterday, it reminded me, I'm sorry, Dr. Holder, to cut you off. There was a story on a woman who lives here in Jacksonville who the apartment complex, her AC went out, and the apartment complex is taking a long time to repair it. Come to find out, there is no law to make apartments have air conditioning in Jacksonville, in Florida.
In Florida.
Yeah. But she said that she was going to the mall or going inside stores, going in libraries in order to get cool temperature. Just imagine that, right? For those people who can afford, like you say, they're not the jet setter. She's not a jet setter. She's just a elderly woman on a fixed income. Fortunately, she has enough strength, enough health, not health issues that prohibit her from going to a store or even having the transportation. But just think about that, though. She has to go to a store or a library in order to get cool. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about climate change and global warming. We have this evening Dr. Cheryl Holder and Dr. Lorene Husband, If you have a question for our guests, dial in 888-669-1280. Again, 888-669-1280. So I want to shift a bit and talk about how do we improve the climate, right? We hear a lot about, we all know that something is happening because everywhere I go, people are saying something is happening. This heat is not normal. What is going on? Now, if you listen to some church folks, they're going to tell you to read read the Bible and you'll find out what's happening because the world is just burning up, right? But I want to focus right now on what are some things we could do to improve the climate, because Dr. Holder and Dr. Husband, it seems, and from the example that Dr. Husband gave, what they did in Kenya, it seems like there are things that we can do. Let's focus on that, Dr. Holder. I'm glad you're shaking your head.
Well, I got to tell folks, individual actions, you'll hear it all the time. Individual action won't change anything. We got to do the big policy change, stop the fossil fuel use. But individual actions help improve your health and push you towards proper voting. One of the first individual action I say is switch to a plant-based diet primarily. That saves you money, saves your health, and agriculture, to what Dr. Husband described, is one of the biggest drivers of why we're using too much fossil fuel, and also because of fertilizer and the way we're growing our crops and the way food is produced and processed, that if we change and eating more fruits and vegetables, a whole lot of more vegetables, and changing how we eat, we can decrease the use of fossil fuel, and we decrease the amount of transportation of foods. We eat local and eat healthy and improve your health. So if you do anything, meatless Mondays, meatless Tuesdays, choose some days of cutting out red meat out of your diet, then go with chicken and lamb and move up and eating more plants. That helps your health and helps the planet. And then
when I saw that, Dr. Holder, on my list of things, it said reduce meat consumption. I'm like, what does meat consumption have to do with managing the climate? So thank you for breaking that down.
we cut down a lot of trees in Brazil and all over the world to grow food for cows to graze and eat. And that's partly what caused deforestation. And then the meat and the cows also release methane when they burp. So we're getting a lot more greenhouse gases from losing the trees and then the cows burping. So we decrease that pressure for red meat. We improve our atmosphere almost immediately and improve our heart.
Wow.
And to add on to that, this is something that some people might not think about is, I know a lot of our audiences, at least I know from my friends, they love eating shrimp. If you're eating farmed shrimp, it takes a lot of resources, just almost as much as it takes to raise cows. So you might want to also have no shrimp Mondays and no shrimp whatever day. And then also localize your actions, Jocelyn. So we need to re-examine our consumer habits. For example, if you think about it, when Apple tells you that you need to update your phone, or Samsung tells you to update your phone, that may seem like something you really need to do, but every single part in that thing that you're using is mined or produced in a factory, and that takes a lot of energy to produce. So the action of mining releases carbon back into the atmosphere that's been trapped into the earth. The whole action of breaking whatever mineral it is that's in our phones is also, the process of it is using fossil fuels to produce the gadget. So rethink your need to always upgrade something and look around your house. You probably have enough clothes. You probably have enough shoes. You probably have enough of everything, maybe except for food, and needing to go to work or to school, that you can pretty much live for a pretty long time with the things that you have. But in the West, we have become acclimated to wanting more every day and almost every week. I would say really reduce that habit, because every single thing in your house used energy to be produced. And as long as we keep thinking that it's going to take somebody else to do it, we too are part of the problem. So those single actions cumulatively as a community, we can make a big difference if we start changing our consumer habits.
Dr. Hubman, I'm hearing you say the latest and the greatest is not necessarily the bestest of the things that we need to do.
Not if we want our grandchildren to have an earth that they can call home. We are being very, very selfish. And that's why I applaud the actions from the youth from Montana that sued the state and won, because they deserve to have an earth that they can live on.
Exactly.
And we, the adults, are choosing not to make the right decisions because of we are pursuing the mighty dollar.
Yeah.
So what policies can we get behind? Or, a lot of people will say they don't know what to do. So let's talk about, we talked about those tangible things. I won't go online and shopping tonight, Lorene, I promise. But because you're right, I have enough to last me forever, right? Other than food. Exactly. And so what policies, when we have folks that are coming in to meet with us, aspiring politicians, what should we be saying to them about those things that matter to us as it relates to climate change and global warming? Tell them, well, you need to get behind this policy, or, whatever.
Well, when we look at policies, we have to look globally. So we need an administration. So it's even at this point, even bigger than just an individual policy. But look at the administration and look at the political parties and seeing what is their understanding of climate change and what do they respect in terms of fossil fuel use. The policies must go towards decreasing fossil fuel use rapidly. So it means no more approval of some of these pipelines. It means changing when we say that we need to go electric in vehicles, especially for transportation, for communities, counties, cities, police, big ticket items. There should be a support from the government for moving towards that. When we say stop coal mining, there should be support from that government and from the political party to say no more coal mines and support the transition of the population who work in coal mines to other types of industry. There should be massive support of your political party for solar energy because it's renewable. So when you see a party that is not coalescing around the concept of decreasing fossil fuel and decreasing anything that generates more fuel, you're going to be in trouble. And that's where the policies come in. Like Florida, there's some local policies that we can do. Like every school district should move towards electrification of their school buses. Health reasons. Those school buses are many times operated on diesel fuel, which is very polluting, and it goes into poorer communities and triggers the kids' asthma. Kids are low to the ground. They get much more of those fumes. There's no reason a school district should not jump on the millions of dollars that's out there right now to change over those buses and make them electrified. So you stop polluting these poorer communities. Highways went through Black communities. There's no doubt it was racism and our highways were done. I am a big advocate of electrifying all vehicles. If you can afford an electric vehicle, get an electric vehicle. Not only does it decrease the amount of pollution, because transportation is one of the biggest reasons why we're polluting our planet, but you also stop that pollution going through these poorer Black communities and worsening the asthma, heart disease, everything, and cancer causing for our Black communities, because that's where they put the highways. So there are policies that can improve your health and improve the planet at the same time. Public transportation needs to be encouraged throughout every state, because then you'll have people getting out of their cars and finding more effective ways of transporting thousands of people so there's less pollution. So those policies are very effective. Even continuing remote work, where everybody doesn't have to drive in to the offices. Those are really good policies because it decreases the amount of pollution that we put out. There's so many things that could be done. Educating girls worldwide is probably one of the best ways to improve our environment, because women tend to pay the huge price of traveling distances and not having the amount of resources to protect their families. And once they do a way better job of protecting their families. And farmers, small farmers, so they don't get this mass production of these foods that half of us throw away. Food waste is huge in this country because it's processed food that no one's eating. So we can go back to the basics and you'll see improvement in health, just these changing policies, improvement in health, and improving the planet. It's all very doable.
Thank you. Wow, you've given us a lot to think about, and I even think about. I was again in doing my research. I was looking where it says engage in community efforts, join or start local environmental groups, participate in cleanup events, and work with neighbors to implement sustainable practices, even as simple as getting neighborhoods to pick up trash and litter as a community project and work together to start a community garden and things like that are the few things that come to mind for me. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about climate change and global warming. Our guests, Dr. Holder and Dr. Husband, gave us some practical advice or tips. If you have any questions, dial in now, 888-669-1280. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page, as we are on every Tuesday. I have to give that shameless plug for Pause for the Truth right now to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can make sure that these messages, this information that you're sharing, that our guests are sharing tonight, that you pay it forward and share it with other people who may have missed the broadcast tonight. Dr. Husband, what are some other things that you're doing? I know you've been doing some work with Black churches. What are some other work that you're doing in the space of climate change and global warming? And I know you educate me on something every day. Stop shopping, Jocelyn. Eat more vegetables, Jocelyn. She does tell me that all the time. And as I pull out shamefully my plastic bottle, she's using a reusable bottle. Don't share me. Don't. I knew she was gonna put it out.
That's your friend.
Lorene, what are some other things that you have been working on or you'd like to share to really help folks realize this is not hard? There are things that they can do that are doable.
Well, in Florida, one of the things that I would recommend is, with all the sunshine that we do have, I know this just is not going to necessarily appeal to a lot of people, but we have plenty of sunshine to dry our clothes outside. Now think about that. How long you run your dryer. You're not even actually drying your clothes yourself. It's a machine doing it. So what if you just hang them outside and walk away and come back and they will be dry? That necessarily might not appeal to people, but for the sake of our children's children who are to come and inherit this earth, that might not seem like a really big cost. The other one that I do, and I know it might not appeal to people as well, is when I'm washing dishes. I like washing dishes with my hands. I save my rinsing water and I actually water my plants with it. So, because it's just, what is it called? It's like gray water. Nothing really, it doesn't have any pollutants necessary. It actually doesn't if it's clean rinsing water. And then after going home last year to Kenya, where we don't have plentiful of water in the city, you have to conserve water, and the government limits how much water is being piped into your houses. So you really have to be careful with how much water you're using, especially for bathing. I got back to actually using a container that I put my water in to bathe in. And so I end up using 2 buckets of water unless I'm washing my hair, because you really don't need that much water. But when you're running it, you can end up spending a whole water tank. and you are not cognizant of it. So those are some small measures that you can take just in the home that will actually save a lot of energy. And then the other one I wanted to mention from a policy perspective, and this is something I have recommended through the city, and because of our political climate, we are kind of teetering on whether we accept this, is doing a climate impact assessment for every new development, and also doing a climate impact assessment for any redevelopment. When infrastructure has to be upgraded, we need to ensure that we are making the most energy efficient retrofitting of any building. We are also, like, for example, I think I sent you that meeting tonight, Jocelyn, where they are going to rezone 107 acres from agricultural to light industrial on the north side. Randy White is having that meeting at FSCJ North tonight. So I'm part of the Climate Coalition, and I said, since I'm not able to attend this meeting, can somebody go and make sure that they propose, the city does a climate impact assessment with the developer or for the developer before they're allowed to make any new developments? Because knowing that it was almost, it felt like 120 degrees, do we really want to allow developers to continue cutting our trees, especially on the north side where we have a huge heat island because we have less trees and more concrete buildings just trapping the heat? And, when people, when you try to explain what greenhouse gases are, so think about a greenhouse. A greenhouse is that you create an ideal situation to grow plants. So when we have greenhouse gases, we are in essence creating an ideal environment for all these amazing, horrible conditions to continue happening. And there's really nothing that we can do, because whereas it takes 7 to 10 years for methane gas to dissipate into the atmosphere, it takes hundreds of years for CO2 emissions to dissipate. So we are in essence just trapped in a greenhouse of horrible conditions that will continue to destroy the earth unless we can figure a way to capture it back using trees, plants, and other ways that we're trying to come up with.
Dr. Holder, for just to enlighten you, Jacksonville North Side would be what Miami's black side of town is for us. But not only that, it includes the downtown area, which what downtown, the tarmacs, the microenvironments that they create within that area geographically, and the things that how it really can affect the local community. So while our European counterparts tend to disseminate out into the suburbs where you have a lot more greenery and stuff of that nature, they don't have to face what we do over on Jacksonville's north side, which is where my practice is at, in that community.
Yeah, those communities can be 5 to 7, sometimes 10 degrees hotter. So when you're 90 degrees in the suburbs, think like 100 degrees in the north side because of all the concrete. And at night, it doesn't cool down because concrete releases heat at night. So you're looking at even more heat. So that population is suffering more. And I see a comment in the chat about the electric cars, that everybody can't afford electric cars. And that's absolutely true. But there are dollars right now in the infrastructure that Biden came down that releases money for school buses, for the county's equipment. So yes, as a community, we should capture those dollars and make sure whatever can be switched over gets switched over. If you're rich and you're buying a new car, switch over to electric. In the long run, it improves the health of the poorer communities and it improves the atmosphere. The problem we have, there's another comment that talks about it's too expensive to be environmentally conscious. When we look at the real data, if they added the true cost of what it is in terms of health, because every time those cancers we cause in Cancer Alley, somebody paid for it. When the asthma decompensates, when you get the allergies, when you get into malaria, when you're getting all these health issues, we're paying for it. And so it is not, and if you can improve your health By making these changes, you're going to live longer. So overall, the cost is a lot less when we move towards the environment. When we get solar in, we save a lot of pollution, and in the long run, we get better. There are a lot of community solar projects, and there are projects in the solar. There's a whole banking issue and dollars to help homeowners switch over to solar and maybe not cost you anymore. So there are many solutions out there that's right available that will save you money and improve your health.
Payment now or payment later. You can
Exactly.
and you pay more later.
And you pay more later.
Right.
Absolutely.
Wow, this has been very interesting. And I think the one, Dr. Holder, one thing that you said that was very unusual is the cow and methane.
Yeah.
And that, wow.
The millions of cows all over the planet. And to think half of Brazil, the Amazon was cut down to put in grazing
Cow
land for the cows.
A cow pet.
Yeah, so they could sell the beef. So we have a huge responsibility, and those are richer people who are doing that. When it comes to Florida, we burn sugarcane, which pollutes the environment tremendously, harms the people who live near the sugarcane farms, and we know who those are in Belglade, poor folks, to make sugar. And you think of the injury that sugar has in terms of diabetes, heart disease, and all the complications. If we could find cheaper ways and better ways, which we do have, green ways of growing sugar, we have a huge impact on our communities. So there are lots of solutions. It is affordable. It is more affordable to do the right thing.
What are those specific heat-related illnesses that are common nowadays? I mean, and there may have been, as you said from the onset, Dr. Holder, this didn't just happen. This has been happening a while, but are we finding more or different types of heat-related illnesses now than ever before?
What we're getting is just more heat illnesses, and the Biden administration just released a tracker because we were not tracking it across the country when folks showed up with their being dizzy or if they fell. Many times what we saw were trauma, and it turned out they were doing construction work, they're in the fields doing the picking or doing whatever works, call it the school guards, a police force, and they had accidents because of the heat. We're now starting to track that. Just actual heat strokes, we're seeing that. Then the other anger, the emotional issues, we're just going to start tracking it and seeing even more. So we know heat is a huge problem in the complications. Then the triggering, what it does is worsens underlying disease. You talk about older people needing the relief. Older people are very susceptible to dehydration for a lot of factors that physiologically they don't sense that they're thirsty. And also the kidney does not concentrate urine as well. So you would expect the urine to be reabsorbed in the body even though they're drinking, but it doesn't because the kidney has gotten older and changes the concentration. So older people are very susceptible. So they'll show up in your emergency room for other things, but it really comes back to being dehydrated. And that was the underlying issue. Pregnant women, some of our preterm labor and the complications we see comes in again from the dehydration that happens in these very hot communities, these urban heat islands, and also the pollution. So we're seeing those complications with preterm births, low birth weights, worsening of eclampsia and blood pressures. So it piles on. Now, it may not be captured as the climate, but we know underlying much of this is the disruption, the equilibrium that we would have, which then makes other problems worse. So it's huge.
I can't speak enough in terms of, I got a very geriatric population, obviously, because I got older, so did my patients. And the pre-dehydration is what I call it. You know, you can look at it with the lab numbers when they come back. And these same patients are always bordering on elevated BUN, the pre-dehydration type status. And it doesn't take but just a little bit of, I told a lady today, you walk out to the mailbox, you know, that heat as bad as it is, if you're kind of teeter-tottering on already being dehydrated, it would not take much. And true to form, she mentioned how she went out there, earlier this week and got so dizzy by the time she got back to the house, and which was just at the end of her driveway. And so people don't really realize how close to being dehydrated you may be, especially as you get older. Speaking for me personally, but especially as you get older, how that dehydration can really kick in and kick in fast because you're already borderline dehydrated.
Yeah, but you also have physicians who tell patients to go out in the sun and get some vitamin D. So you got to balance that, getting that vitamin D and drinking water.
Yeah,
Right
you
now.
can get it early in the morning before the sun comes up really bad. So I tell folks, avoid 10 to 3, just don't go out in that heat. And you can take a supplement or go out later. So there's safer times, and also check in with other folks. So if you're going to do this, have somebody who's checking on you to make sure that you're well and you're not falling over, you're not feeling dizzy. So yeah, you can still get sun, but you got to get it before 9 o'clock in the morning.
And you just made me think of something else too, Dr. Holder, which I posted on my social media page, telling people don't leave your pet or your baby in the car.
Oh yeah.
That's just something that you can't. I know you want to take your fur babies with you, but it's too hot. You cannot leave them in the car. I see people and they'll have the window barely cracked. And I'm like, you sit in that car with that window barely cracked and see how you feel. The poor dogs are, just have their nose up, just trying to, and then the air they're breathing outside is so hot, not getting any relief. So I just have to turn my head because I really want to bust the window open and let the give them some air. So, really pay attention to that. We're nearing the end of our show. This has been a great conversation. We didn't touch on everything we wanted to. Definitely would like to have you all back. I have a bunch of nuggets that I'm going to say as I give my closing remarks, but I would like to give our guests the opportunity to share your closing thoughts or remarks on tonight's topic. Dr. Holder, I'll start with you.
Well, there's so many health impacts. It's been going on for a while, and there are folks who are more vulnerable. You've got to pay attention to this and vote appropriately, that we protect our communities and protect the future generation. And there is still time. And every climate solution is a health solution. So you're going to buy time and improve your health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holder. Dr. Husband, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
For those of you who live in Duval County, make sure you find out what the city's climate resiliency plan is, and then make sure you're holding your city council members accountable to implementing it. And I have to say, it's a resiliency plan that's kind of erring on being very light, and it doesn't really have very actionable goals. We have to make it stronger. And then consider your own personal habits. And if you're somebody who likes to go shopping, if it's for groceries, consolidate your trips as much as you can. If you don't have to go to the store to get one item, just go on the weekends to get everything you need. So it's those little things that may not seem like a lot, but if we start paying attention to what we're doing personally, and also using the right that so many of our people have fought for us to be able to vote and participate in democracy, and get your voice heard and demand better for our communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you both. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
Well, I'd like to thank both ladies for coming on. As you notice, it's one of my quiet times. I like being quiet and listening because I learn a lot. The two things I just leave with, in addition to thanking our ladies, remember, all that look like meat ain't necessarily meat, a good meat. No telling where that is coming from. So the start of just trying to become more meatless in terms of your diet is going to be a lot more healthier for you, especially when people start looking at all these conspiracy theories about this, that, and the other. Okay, well, look at one about meats, and maybe you'll get away from meats and go toward a plant-based diet more so. The only other thing is, that I've noticed, and both guests and Ms. Turner and the rest of our crew, one of the things that we always keep harping on: vote, vote, vote in your best interest for you and your family. And our best interest is definitely one in which we have to take better care of the planet, because we have to live here. If we don't take good care of the planet, then we won't be living on this planet much longer, not in the capacity that we're living right now. And it's mainly for our children, because this old gray hair, it signals that my time is near. Okay, now I'm not going to say 10 years near, 15 years near, but when I look at a granddaughter or great granddaughter that's only 2 years old, you know, they deserve the right to live on a planet where they can live and breathe in comfort, and let them make their own mess and not live in just a mess that we've made of the planet. So,
thank you, Dr. King.
And one real thing on Dr. Holder.
Yeah, I was going to say it.
In the chat. Okay, go ahead. You can say it. Yeah.
So Dr. Holder gave her contact information. If you'd like to follow her on Instagram, Dr. Cheryl Holder. That's DrCheryl Holder. And Dr. Husband gave us a link to a site, climate.nasa.gov. That's https://climate.nasa.gov. Check this site for an amazing depiction of what is happening to the earth and what you can do about it. Let me tell you my quick tips on what I learned tonight. Things that we all know. We all went to school. We all were told to eat healthier. But if we start to have that meatless Monday or whatever day, maybe your big Sunday dinner, you know, that's not realistic. Be honest with yourself. You cook a big meal on Sunday and you have leftovers on Monday. Maybe your meatless day is another day of the week. Whatever it is, choose a meatless day. Also, as much as you can, and I will talk about myself as well, try to eliminate plastic, the use of plastic so often. And my friends have bought me reusable bottles. I just get lazy and don't do it. And I am going to look up, because Dr. Kane has also talked to me about getting an electric vehicle, or at least hybrid. And I'm even, Dr. Holder, going to look into solar panels, as well as really advocating to our elected officials about getting some of that money to turn our buses into electric vehicles, and conserve water. I'm not sure if I will do what Dr. Husband said and use the tubs of water, but I will not waste the water as I do. Dr. Husband, I'm guilty. I'll turn it on and let it run far longer before I actually get in. I'll be more conscientious about that. The point is, there are things that we can do. Just start somewhere. If you don't think that it will matter in your generation, think about future generations. We all see on the news the extreme temperature, the extreme weather conditions. We all cried for the people in Hawaii now. That was extreme weather that happened with the strong winds and everything. So don't think that these things are just happening, just happening. These things are related to the environment and the things that we have caused over the past, I'll say 100 years. But there's hope. There are things that we can do. Advocate to your politicians to stop cutting down trees. As Lorene said, plant a tree. Yeah, I do listen to my friends partially. I now have a garden and trees in my backyard, thanks to Lorene in talking to me. But whatever your small changes are, make them now. As usual, thank you for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. Drs. Holder, Dr. Husband, and of course, Dr. Kane, thank you for your time. To our guests, we'll see you next week. Good evening.
We're grateful that you joined us today and hope that you gain valuable insights on our current topic. We look forward to having you with us next time as we explore trending issues in our community and discover ways to simplify life for you and your loved ones. Our dedicated panelists and staff are committed to sharing knowledge and serving our community. But now we need your support. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and spread this valuable knowledge to others. Don't forget to invite your family and friends to tune in our podcast every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To stay connected, you can visit our website at www.pauseforthetruth.com. That's www.pauseforthetruth.com. And show your support by liking us on Facebook, following us on Twitter, and linking with us on LinkedIn. Most importantly, join us live on Facebook or YouTube every Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. by simply visiting our website and selecting your preferred listening channel. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Feel free to email us with any questions, concerns, or comments about our podcast. We also welcome recommendations for future show topics that you feel are important. So reach out to us at info@pauseforthetruth.com. I would also like to give thanks to our behind-the-scenes technology engineer, Mr. Tyrone Jackson, owner and operator of CallTyrone.net, which offers a full line of computer and technology services. Go to www.calltyrone.net for a complete list of services. Thank you again for being part of Pause for the Truth family. Together, we can make a positive impact on our community by sharing knowledge and empowering one another. This has been Dr. Rogers Kane, along with Ms. Jocelyn Turner, and again, Mr. Tyrone Jackson, wishing you a very good evening and good night.